The transmission chamber of the United Earth Defense Force's primary orbital station hummed with a barely contained electrical tension. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her augmented neural interface flickering with thousands of data streams that most humans couldn't comprehend. The Zorian diplomatic transmission continued to play, its alien language a complex tapestry of harmonic frequencies and quantum-encoded meanings. Dr. Marcus Chen, the station's chief xenolinguistic analyst, moved to her side. His fingers danced across a holographic interface, breaking down the Zorian message into its constituent parts. "They're not just demanding surrender," he muttered. "They're performing a ritualistic dominance display. Every syllable is calculated to trigger submission." Elena's lips curled into a slight smile. The Zorians had no idea what they were walking into. Beneath the orbital station, Earth had transformed. The planet that once seemed fractured by national boundaries now pulsed with a unified purpose. The Global Collaborative Defense Initiative, a program that had quietly evolved over decades, had turned human civilization into a single adaptive organism. Every research center, every university, every technological hub was now a potential weapons system. In Sao Paulo, a team of quantum computing experts worked alongside biomechanical engineers. Their current project, adaptive neural networks that could predict and counter alien communication strategies. In Mumbai, AI developers had created predictive models that could simulate potential first contact scenarios with terrifying accuracy. Tokyo's Advanced Materials Research Center had developed nanotechnologies that could restructure matter at the molecular level. The transmission from the Zorian hegemony continued, its arrogance increasing with each passing second. They spoke of humanity as if it were a primitive species, a mere footnote in galactic history. They described Earth as a resource-rich planetary substrate ready for systematic harvesting and cultural recalibration. Dr. Chen's translation program worked overtime. "They're not just planning an invasion," he said, his voice a mixture of academic fascination and growing anger. "They're describing us like we're a crop to be harvested." Elena's neural interface began to pulse. A series of quantum-encrypted messages were already spreading across Earth's defensive network. Each transmission was a seed, a potential strategy, a fragment of a larger plan that was simultaneously being developed and implemented. In the command center, holographic displays showed multiple scenarios. Some were straightforward military projections, others were more complex. Sociological models that predicted Zorian behavioral patterns, technological simulations that mapped potential conflict trajectories. A young lieutenant approached, her augmented eyes shifting between multiple data streams. "Commander Rodriguez, the global defense grid is now at full integration. We're not just ready, we're anticipating." The irony wasn't lost on Elena. The Zorians believed they were delivering an ultimatum. In reality, they were walking into a trap decades in the making. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to transform potential destruction into opportunity. The transmission from the Zorian hegemony reached its crescendo, an elaborate ritual of dominance that had subjugated countless civilizations across the galaxy. Their language was a weapon, designed to psychologically break potential resistance before the first shot was fired. But they had never encountered humanity. Dr. Chen's translation program suddenly shifted. Hidden within the Zorian transmission was a complex quantum signature, a microscopic piece of data that was simultaneously a communication, a probe, and something entirely unprecedented. The Zorians had no idea they were already being analyzed, their own communication systems being mapped and understood at a level they couldn't comprehend. "They're sending more than a message," Dr. Chen said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're sending a challenge." Elena Rodriguez turned, her augmented eyes reflecting the holographic displays that surrounded her. The entire orbital station seemed to hold its breath, a living, thinking defensive system waiting to be activated. "Challenge accepted," she said quietly. Outside the station's reinforced windows, Earth continued its rotation. From this distance, it looked peaceful, a blue-green marble suspended in the infinite darkness of space. But those who understood knew the truth. This was not a planet waiting to be conquered. This was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. The Zorian hegemony had just made the most significant miscalculation in its galactic history. They believed they were initiating a conquest. In reality, they had just triggered humanity's transformation. And nothing would ever be the same again. The underground research facility beneath the Atacama Desert was anything but typical. Carved into solid rock and shielded by layers of quantum dispersive materials, it represented the bleeding edge of human potential, a place where the boundaries between biology, technology, and pure imagination blurred into something entirely new. Dr. Aisha Okoye stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers tracing complex neural pathways that seemed to dance and reconfigure themselves in real time. Project Horizon was more than a defense initiative. It was a radical reimagining of human capability. "We're not just preparing for war," she murmured to her assistant, Gabriel Rodriguez, a distant cousin of Commander Elena Rodriguez. "We're preparing for a fundamental transformation of our species." The facility hummed with an almost living energy. In one section, biomechanical engineers worked on adaptive combat exoskeletons that could read and anticipate a soldier's movements before the soldier themselves was aware of them. Nearby, quantum communication specialists developed encryption methods so complex they bordered on sentient communication. A soft alarm triggered, and Gabriel pulled up a secondary display. Satellite data from the far side of the moon showed increased Zorian reconnaissance activity. But this was no ordinary monitoring. The humans were actively baiting the alien reconnaissance systems, feeding them carefully crafted misinformation that would take months, perhaps years, to fully unravel. In Tokyo, a different kind of preparation was underway. The Global Cultural Adaptation Team, a group of linguists, psychologists, and AI specialists, was developing something far more subtle than a weapon. They were creating comprehensive models of Zorian social structures, psychological vulnerabilities, and communication patterns. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the team's lead, explained to his colleagues, "We're not just studying their language. We're creating a comprehensive map of their collective consciousness. Every communication, every cultural artifact, is a potential vulnerability." The team had already developed preliminary algorithms that could predict Zorian behavioral responses with startling accuracy. What looked like random data to an outside observer was actually a complex web of potential scenarios, each branch meticulously mapped and prepared for. Back in the Atacama facility, Dr. Okoye was working on something extraordinary. The Collective Consciousness Interface, or CCI, was more than a communication system. It was a fundamental reimagining of human interaction. By leveraging quantum entanglement and advanced neural mapping, the system would allow soldiers to share not just information, but entire experiential frameworks. "Imagine," she told Gabriel, "a combat unit that doesn't just communicate, but truly understands each other at a neurological level. Instant tactical comprehension, shared emotional states, the elimination of miscommunication." The implications were staggering. Traditional military hierarchies would become obsolete. Tactical decision-making would happen at the speed of thought, with each team member contributing simultaneously. Meanwhile, in the Canadian Arctic, another crucial piece of the preparation was taking shape. The Orbital Defense and Redirection Network, ODRN, was a system that transformed near-Earth space into a living, thinking defensive barrier. Thousands of interconnected satellites, each one a potential weapon, communication node, and intelligence-gathering platform. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, the ODRN's chief strategist, understood the true nature of their preparation. "We're not building a defense," she often said. "We're building an immune system for our entire species." The satellites weren't just passive observers. They could actively manipulate gravitational fields, redirect incoming objects, jam communications, or transform into offensive platforms in milliseconds. Each one was a node in a vast, distributed intelligence that could think and react faster than any centralized command structure. Gabriel watched as Dr. Okoye made a final adjustment to the CCI system. The holographic display shifted, showing potential connection pathways that looked more like living neural networks than traditional communication diagrams. "The Zorians think they understand warfare," Dr. Okoye said quietly. "They see conflict as a linear progression. Domination, submission, conquest. But we're creating something entirely different." She turned to Gabriel, her eyes reflecting the complex holographic display. "We're not preparing to fight a war. We're preparing to redefine what conflict means." Outside the facility, the Atacama Desert stretched endlessly, a place of extreme conditions where life found a way to not just survive, but thrive. It was a perfect metaphor for humanity's approach. The Zorian hegemony was about to learn that preparation was an art form, and humans were its most innovative artists. The first wave of Zorian ships entered Earth's orbital space like metallic predators, their bioengineered hulls pulsing with an organic sheen that defied traditional understanding of spacecraft design. Captain Zartok, a veteran of 100 conquests, felt something unusual as they approached the blue-green planet, a sensation he would later describe as unease, though no Zorian had truly experienced such an emotion before. Within the first 3 milliseconds of engagement, everything went wrong. The quantum-entangled defense network that humanity had constructed was nothing like the predictive models in Zorian intelligence reports. It wasn't just a defensive system, it was a living, thinking organism that anticipated rather than simply reacted. Microsatellites no larger than softballs began to swarm, their movements so precisely coordinated that they seemed to move as a single intelligent entity. Lieutenant Kira Jung, stationed in the Earth's orbital command center, watched with a mixture of scientific fascination and strategic calculation. Her neural interface allowed her to see the battle in ways no traditional human could. Streams of data, predictive models, and tactical projections that danced across her perception. "They don't even know they're already defeated," she murmured to her co-pilot, a next-generation AI combat assistant named ARI, Adaptive Response Intelligence Algorithm. The Zorian ship's first salvo should have been devastating. Plasma weapons capable of liquefying entire planetary surfaces prepared to fire, but something was interfering with their targeting systems. Microscopic quantum disruption fields, invisible and undetectable by conventional means, began to subtly alter the fundamental quantum states of the alien weapon systems. Captain Zartok's flagship, the hegemonic Blade, was the first to experience the full scope of human innovation. Its primary weapon system began to malfunction in ways that defied all known physical principles. Targeting computers showed impossible trajectories. Communication systems picked up what seemed like random noise, but were actually carefully constructed quantum signals that were systematically dismantling the ship's defensive capabilities. In the research facilities across Earth, scientists and military strategists watched the unfolding battle with a clinical detachment that would have been impossible just decades earlier. This wasn't just a defensive action, it was a comprehensive system of technological and psychological warfare. Dr. Marcus Chen, the xenolinguistic expert from the orbital station, was particularly fascinated. The way the human defense systems were interacting with the Zorian ships was less like a traditional battle and more like a complex linguistic negotiation. Each defensive action was a kind of statement, a communication that went beyond simple destruction. Aboard the hegemonic Blade, Junior Navigation Officer Vril Max began to experience something unprecedented in Zorian military history: doubt. The ship's systems were responding in ways that seemed almost intelligent. It was as if the very space around them had become a thinking, adaptive entity. One of the most remarkable aspects of the defense was its efficiency. Where traditional military doctrine would call for overwhelming force, the human systems used minimal energy to maximum effect. A single microsatellite could disable an entire weapon system. A quantum disruption field could render massive battleships completely inoperable without firing a single traditional weapon. Lieutenant Zheng's neural interface began to compile real-time data. The first wave of Zorian ships was experiencing a 78.3% systems failure rate, and the battle had barely begun. But this wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. We're not just defending. AI's synthesized voice calculated through Zheng's neural link. We're teaching. The quantum entangled defense network was collecting information with every microsecond of interaction. Each Zorian ship that approached became a source of data. Its systems slowly unraveled and understood at a fundamental level. It was less a battle and more a comprehensive analysis. Captain Zartok finally understood the true nature of their miscalculation. Humanity wasn't a civilization to be conquered. It was a learning system that transformed conflict itself into a method of communication. As the first wave of Zorian ships began to drift, disabled but not destroyed, a message became clear. This was not an act of mercy. This was a demonstration of capabilities so far beyond the Zorian understanding that it bordered on the incomprehensible. Lieutenant Zheng allowed herself a small smile. The first lesson was complete. The battle for Earth had begun, but it was already over. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the commander, but equally brilliant, stood in the heart of the Adaptive Technologies Research Complex, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with living information. The technological warfare was entering its most intricate phase, and humanity was about to demonstrate something far beyond conventional weaponry. The Zorian ships that survived the initial orbital defense were now unwitting participants in the most comprehensive technological dissection in galactic history. Each disabled vessel became a learning node. Its systems slowly unraveled and understood at a molecular and quantum level. In a secure laboratory beneath the Andes Mountains, a team of quantum engineers and xenotechnological experts worked on something that defied traditional understanding of technology. The Adaptive Mimetic Interface, AMI, was more than a weapon or a communication system. It was a living technological organism that could understand, translate, and ultimately repurpose alien technologies faster than their original creators could comprehend. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing the real-time deconstruction of a captured Zorian propulsion system. What looked like random molecular interactions to an untrained eye was actually a precise dismantling and reimagining of technological principles. We're not just reverse engineering, she explained to her assistant, Dr. Kai Chen. We're learning their fundamental approach to technology and simultaneously developing countermeasures they cannot even conceptualize. Across the globe, similar research centers were engaged in unprecedented technological warfare. In Mumbai, a team of quantum computing experts was developing communication algorithms that could interact with alien systems at a level beyond traditional programming. These weren't just code. They were living mathematical constructs that could adapt, learn, and transform in real time. The Zorian technological framework, which had dominated galactic warfare for centuries, was based on a rigid, hierarchical approach to system design. Each technological component had a specific predetermined function. Humanity's approach was fundamentally different. Every system was a potential everything. A communication relay captured from a disabled Zorian ship began to transform. Nanite swarms, guided by the AMI system, began to reconfigure its molecular structure. What was once an alien communication device was slowly becoming something entirely new, a hybrid technology that combined Zorian engineering with human adaptive principles. Dr. Chen watched in fascination as the relay's quantum signature began to shift. It's not just adapting, he murmured. It's evolving. The global defense network was more than a military system. It was a living, learning entity that processed information at speeds that would have been impossible just decades earlier. Each interaction with Zorian technology added another layer of understanding, another potential defensive or offensive capability. In orbit, the disabled Zorian ships were becoming something else entirely. Quantum adaptive imaging systems revealed a landscape of technological transformation that defied traditional understanding. Hulls were slowly being restructured, communication systems were being rewritten, propulsion mechanisms were being reimagined. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, monitoring the orbital defense network, understood the true nature of what was happening. "We're not just defending," she told her team. "We're conducting the most comprehensive technological first contact in human history." The AMI system developed by Dr. Rodriguez had an unexpected capability. It could not just understand alien technologies. It could communicate with them in a language that went beyond traditional programming. Each captured Zorian system became a potential gateway to understanding their entire technological framework. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. One of the captured communication relays began to reveal complex layers of Zorian technological history. It wasn't just sharing current technological principles. It was providing a comprehensive map of their technological evolution. They'd been technologically stagnant for centuries, Dr. Rodriguez realized. Their entire approach to technology is based on incremental improvements, not fundamental reimagining. Humanity's approach was the exact opposite. Every technological challenge was an opportunity for complete transformation. The Zorian hegemony had believed they were launching an invasion. Instead, they had provided humanity with the most comprehensive technological learning opportunity in their species' history. As the day progressed, the captured Zorian technologies continued to transform. What had been weapons of conquest were slowly becoming tools of understanding, bridges between two fundamentally different approaches to technological development. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the holographic display, a slight smile crossing her face. The technological warfare had only just begun, and humanity was just getting started. The Global Psychological Warfare Division operated from a nondescript building in Buenos Aires, its true nature hidden behind layers of digital camouflage and quantum encryption. Dr. Amara Okik leaned back in her chair, watching the complex holographic displays that mapped the psychological landscape of the Zorian military hierarchy. This was warfare beyond weapons, a battlefield of consciousness, cultural understanding, and systemic vulnerability. "We're not just breaking their communication," Dr. Okik explained to her team of cultural analysts, linguists, and cognitive specialists. "We're dismantling their entire conceptual framework of conflict." The Zorian hegemony had conquered countless civilizations through a sophisticated system of psychological domination. Their communication was a weapon, a carefully constructed language designed to trigger submission responses in conquered species. But they had never encountered a species that could weaponize understanding itself. In the first phase of psychological operations, the human team began to inject carefully crafted information streams into Zorian communication networks. These weren't simple propaganda messages. They were complex narrative constructs that exploited the fundamental cognitive vulnerabilities in Zorian social structures. Captain Vrelnax aboard the partially disabled hegemonic blade began to experience the first signs of what humans would call cognitive dissonance. The communication signals streaming through the ship's systems carried more than information. They carried existential challenges to everything he understood about his civilization. One message, translated through multiple layers of quantum linguistic algorithms, spoke directly to the individual experiences of Zorian soldiers. It wasn't about defeating them. It was about helping them understand the true nature of their own society. In the research facilities, Dr. Okik's team had spent years developing a comprehensive understanding of Zorian social psychology. Their models went far beyond traditional intelligence gathering. They had created predictive frameworks that could anticipate not just individual responses, but entire systemic reactions. "Look here," she pointed to a holographic display showing the intricate social connections within the Zorian military hierarchy. Each communication is designed to create micro-fractures in their collective understanding. The psychological warfare was multi-layered. Some messages targeted individual soldiers, introducing subtle doubts about their mission. Others were aimed at mid-level commanders, highlighting the inefficiencies in their conquest strategies. The most sophisticated attacks targeted the fundamental philosophical underpinnings of the Zorian hegemony itself. Lieutenant Gabriel Rodriguez, a specialist in adaptive communication systems, monitored the responses. "We're not just breaking their communication," he said. "We're offering an alternative narrative." Aboard Zorian ships, soldiers began to experience unprecedented emotional states. Doubt, curiosity, a growing sense that their understood reality might be fundamentally flawed. These were emotions that the rigid Zorian social structure had systematically suppressed for generations. The most brilliant aspect of the psychological warfare was its subtlety. Each communication was a carefully constructed puzzle, designed to make Zorian soldiers and commanders question not just their current mission, but the entire historical narrative of their civilization. Dr. O'Keefe's team had discovered something profound about the Zorian social structure. Despite centuries of conquest, their society was built on a surprisingly fragile psychological foundation. Generations of unchallenged superiority had created deep, unexamined vulnerabilities. "They've never truly been challenged," she explained to her team. "Their entire social narrative is built on an unquestioned assumption of cultural superiority." The communication streams began to introduce historical narratives that the Zorians had never considered. Accounts of civilizations that had resisted, survived, and ultimately transformed in the face of attempted conquest. Each story was a psychological weapon more powerful than any physical armament. Captain Vrilmax found himself questioning everything. The communication signals carried something unprecedented, a form of empathy that went beyond the Zorian understanding of interpersonal connection. They weren't just challenging his mission. They were offering a fundamentally different way of understanding existence. By the end of the first communication cycle, something extraordinary had begun to happen. Zorian military units started to fragment not through external force, but through internal philosophical revelation. Dr. O'Keefe watched the holographic displays, seeing the complex psychological landscape shift in real time. "We're not destroying them," she said quietly. "We're helping them understand themselves." The psychological warfare had only just begun, but its impact was already profound. The Zorian hegemony was about to learn that the most dangerous weapon was not a physical instrument of destruction, but the power of understanding. The strike team assembled in the pre-jump chamber was anything but conventional. Commander Elena Rodriguez surveyed her team, a blend of next-generation soldiers, quantum strategists, and cultural intervention specialists. Their mission wasn't a traditional military operation. It was a precision strike designed to unravel the very foundations of the Zorian hegemony. Dr. Imani Okoro, the team's lead xenosociologist, adjusted her neural interface. "We're not just targeting infrastructure," she explained to the team. "We're conducting a surgical intervention into the Zorian civilization's critical systems." Their destination was the Zorian core world of Carax Prime, a planet that had been the administrative center of the hegemony's galactic conquests for millennia. Traditional military doctrine would suggest a massive assault. The human approach was far more nuanced. The ship they used defied traditional understanding of space travel. Developed in the secret laboratories of the Adaptive Technologies Research Complex, it could manipulate quantum states to effectively become undetectable. It wasn't just a vessel of transportation. It was a living, thinking system that could adapt to any potential threat in milliseconds. Lieutenant Chen, the team's quantum navigation specialist, monitored the ship's systems. Each movement was a complex mathematical dance, predicting and countering potential detection mechanisms before they could even be activated. "We're creating holes in their detection grid," he muttered, his neural interface showing a complex web of potential trajectories. Not by avoiding detection, but by fundamentally rewriting the parameters of detection itself. As they approached Carax Prime, the true nature of their mission became clear. This wasn't an invasion. It was a comprehensive systems intervention. The planet's orbital defenses were a marvel of technological engineering, a network of quantum-locked defense platforms that had repelled countless invasion attempts. But humanity had spent years developing something far more sophisticated than a traditional countermeasure. Dr. Okoro activated the first phase of their intervention. Quantum-entangled communication packets began to infiltrate the planet's defense systems. These weren't simple hacking attempts. They were complex narrative constructs that slowly began to rewrite the fundamental operational parameters of the defense network. Aboard the Zorian control stations, operators began to experience inexplicable system anomalies. Defense platforms would momentarily shift their targeting systems, not to a specific threat, but to positions of philosophical reflection. Communication channels would briefly transform into conduits of cultural exchange, rather than defensive coordination. Commander Rodriguez understood the true nature of their mission. "We're not here to destroy," she explained to her team. "We're here to create a moment of fundamental transformation." The strike team's primary objective was a massive data repository, the central archive that contained the comprehensive historical and cultural records of the Zorian hegemony. But they weren't going to destroy it. They were going to fundamentally reimagine it. Specialized quantum data interfaces began to interface with the archive, where a traditional military operation would seek to destroy or capture. The human team was conducting something far more complex. They were creating a comprehensive recontextualization of Zorian historical narrative. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, a specialist in adaptive information systems, monitored the data intervention. "We're not just accessing their information," she said. "We're helping them see their own history from a completely new perspective." Layers of cultural memory began to shift. Historical records that had been locked away for millennia started to become accessible, recontextualized by adaptive algorithms that could understand the deeper psychological implications of each piece of information. The intervention went beyond technology. As the team moved through the facility, they left behind subtle cognitive triggers, quantum-encoded information packets that would slowly help Zorian citizens begin to question the fundamental narratives of their civilization. Dr. Okoro watched as complex data streams began to reshape themselves. "Every civilization has blind spots," she explained. "We're helping them see beyond theirs." The most remarkable aspect of the intervention was its subtlety. They weren't conquering. They were offering a new way of understanding. As the team prepared to extract, Commander Rodriguez looked out over the vast Zorian cityscape. Something fundamental had changed, not through destruction, but through the most powerful tool humanity had ever developed, a comprehensive, empathetic understanding. The Zorian hegemony would never be the same again. The Grand Chamber of the Zorian High Council fell silent as High Coordinator Valoran began to speak. The holographic displays around him showed the comprehensive breakdown of their civilization's most fundamental assumptions, a process that had begun with humanity's surgical intervention. "We are not defeated." Valoran's voice resonated, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. "We are transformed." It was a moment unprecedented in Zorian history. An entire civilization was experiencing collective cognitive recalibration, a process more profound than any military conquest could achieve. The quantum-encoded information packets introduced during the human intervention had done something extraordinary. They hadn't just challenged the Zorian worldview. They had provided a comprehensive framework for reimagining their entire existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from a remote monitoring station, her neural interface capturing every nuanced moment of the Zorian Council's deliberations. This wasn't just a diplomatic breakthrough. It was a fundamental reconstruction of an entire galactic civilization. Captain Zartok, the same officer who had led the initial invasion attempt, stood at the periphery of the council chamber. His presence was itself a testament to the transformation. Where once he would have been bound by strict hierarchical protocols, he now stood as a representative of a new form of understanding. "Our conquest paradigm," Zartok spoke, his voice carrying a weight of newfound complexity, was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of collective potential. The quantum intervention had done more than provide information. It had introduced the Zorians to concepts they had never truly comprehended: collaboration, empathy, individual potential within a collective framework. Their entire civilization was experiencing what humans would call a profound psychological awakening. In the research facilities scattered across human-controlled space, teams of xenosociologists, linguists, and adaptive communication specialists monitored the unfolding transformation. This was unprecedented. A civilization voluntarily dismantling its own historical narrative. Dr. Imani Okoro, leading the observation team, noted the subtle shifts in Zorian communication patterns. They're not just changing, she explained to her colleagues. They're learning to understand change itself as a fundamental state of existence. The Zorian genetic memory, a complex biological database that had preserved their cultural narratives for millennia, was undergoing comprehensive recalibration. Memories that had been locked away, historical perspectives that had been suppressed, began to emerge and interact in complex, unpredictable ways. High Coordinator Valoran presented a proposal that would have been unthinkable mere months earlier. "We must establish a comprehensive cultural exchange," he declared, "not as conquerors, not as conquered, but as potential collaborators." The chamber erupted in a complex harmonic response, part communication, part emotional expression, that human translators would later describe as a collective moment of profound realization. Captain Zartok stepped forward. His presentation detailed the comprehensive failure of the initial invasion attempt, not as a military analysis, but as a case study in cultural misunderstanding. He described humanity not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a catalyst for transformation. "We approached them as a resource to be harvested," Zartok explained. "They approached us as a potential to be understood." The quantum intervention had introduced something far more dangerous than any weapon, a comprehensive framework for understanding complexity. The Zorians were learning that true strength wasn't about dominance, but about adaptive potential. Dr. Rodriguez's neural interface captured the moment of collective transformation. It wasn't just the Zorian leadership experiencing this shift. Across their entire civilization, individuals were simultaneously experiencing a comprehensive cognitive recalibration. Communication networks that had once been tools of control were now becoming platforms of genuine exchange. Military protocols were being rewritten. Cultural narratives were being comprehensively reimagined. "We are not surrendering," High Coordinator Valoran declared, his voice carrying a new complexity. "We are evolving." The human observation team understood the profound nature of what was happening. This wasn't a defeat. This was a fundamental transformation of an entire civilization's understanding of itself. As the Zorian High Council continued its deliberations, something extraordinary was becoming clear. The conflict had never been about conquest. It had been about the potential for understanding. Humanity had not defeated the Zorian hegemony. They had helped them discover themselves. 5 years after the initial conflict, the Earth Galactic Integration Center stood as a testament to an entirely new form of interstellar interaction. Commander Elena Rodriguez walked through the sprawling complex, where humans and former Zorian citizens worked side by side on projects that would have been unimaginable mere years earlier. The center was more than a diplomatic facility. It was a living laboratory of cultural and technological synthesis. Dr. Aisha Okoye approached, her neural interface flickering with complex data streams. "The Quantum Collaborative Research Program is producing results that are rewriting our understanding of fundamental physics," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and academic precision. What had begun as a potential extinction-level conflict had transformed into the most comprehensive cultural and technological exchange in known galactic history. The Zorian refugees who had once been potential conquerors were now integral partners in a collaborative human-Zorian research initiative. In the Central Research Hub, a joint team was developing adaptive communication technologies that could bridge not just linguistic gaps, but fundamental differences in cognitive processing. Captain Zartok, now a lead researcher, worked alongside human colleagues, his once rigid Zorian physiology subtly modified to enhance collaborative potential. "We were wrong," Zartok often said, "about everything." The galactic political landscape had been completely reimagined. The Zorian hegemony no longer existed as a conquering empire. Instead, it had transformed into a collaborative network of species and civilizations, with humanity serving as a catalyst for this profound transformation. Dr. Marcus Chen, now leading the Interspecies Communication Research Division, explained the broader implications to a group of young researchers. It wasn't about defeating an enemy, he would say. It was about expanding the very concept of potential. The technologies developed during the conflict had far-reaching implications. Quantum communication systems that could translate not just language, but entire cultural contexts. Adaptive neural interfaces that allowed for unprecedented levels of cross-species understanding. Technological frameworks that could bridge fundamentally different forms of intelligence. In orbit around Earth, a massive research station served as a living symbol of this new approach. Named the Harmony Platform, it was a collaborative space where species from across the galaxy could come together to solve complex challenges. Zorian researchers worked alongside humans, developing technologies that would have been impossible under the old paradigms of conflict and conquest. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the station, reflecting on the journey. The conflict had never been about winning or losing. It had been about understanding, a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. The refugee integration programs had been equally revolutionary. Zorian citizens who had once been part of a conquering empire were now students, researchers, artists, and collaborators. They were learning what it meant to exist not as a hierarchical collective, but as individuals with unique potential. Dr. Imani Okuro's longitudinal study on cultural transformation was becoming required reading across multiple species. Her research demonstrated how a civilization could fundamentally reimagine itself when presented with a comprehensive framework of understanding. Conflict is just an opportunity for communication, she would often say, when approached with genuine curiosity. The technologies developed during those critical months had transformed multiple fields. Medical research had advanced centuries in mere years. Adaptive communication systems were solving challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. The quantum intervention techniques developed during the conflict were now being used to address complex social and technological challenges across multiple civilizations. Captain Zartok approached Elena, his modified physiological structure a testament to the adaptive potential they had discovered. "We are still learning," he said, a phrase that had become almost philosophical among the integrated research teams. The Earth Galactic Integration Center was more than a diplomatic facility. It was a living demonstration of a fundamental truth, that understanding was the most powerful force in the universe. As the sun set over the research complex, casting long shadows across facilities that represented the cutting edge of interspecies collaboration, Elena Rodriguez understood that they had done something extraordinary. They hadn't just survived a potential extinction-level conflict. They had transformed the very concept of what intelligent life could be. The real journey was just beginning.